Yeah.
How are you, Carl?
Yeah, I'm very well, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. What are you up to today?
Well, it's Good Friday, so luckily it's a bank holiday, so I have the day off. First actual Monday to Friday day off I've had in a long time. Pats are playing away to Shamrock Rovers tonight, so
Big
I'll be
game.
heading up to that. 8 o'clock up in Tala Stadium, so I'm looking forward to that. Always nice to go. Well, I don't say it's always nice to go up to Tala. It's not always nice to go up to Tala to watch Pats and Rovers, but we've done quite well against them this season. We beat them in Richmond and we drew with them up in Tala in the Presidents Cup in pre-season. So yeah, looking forward to the game tonight.
Is there always League of Ireland games on Good Friday?
Traditionally and usually we end up playing Rovers either on Good Friday or around Paddy's Day. It just always
Interesting.
seems to work out that way. I remember it's probably 10 years ago now, but we played Rovers in Richmond on Good Friday, and all the pubs are closed.
Yeah.
So people hadn't a clue what to do. Um, just totally fish out of water. Like people are so used to going to the pub, having a few pints before or after the game, and obviously falling on Good Friday. I think there was actually talks of us not playing on Good Friday at one stage because the pubs being closed. That was probably more of a fan led thing than a club led thing. But yeah, no, it's good to have be able to go for a point or two before the game, and then go up and hopefully watch us get a point or three.
Do you remember a couple of years ago there was the Munster Rugby were looking at getting some sort of exception when they were playing Leinster to serve drink on Good
Yes,
Friday?
yes. Did they get it? I think they did.
I think they did as well, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I guarantee you, if a League of Ireland club at the time applied for that, they would have been laughed at.
yeah, absolutely.
100%, 100%.
Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, so it's different now. Obviously, it's been 2 years, I think, hasn't it, or 3 years since alcohol's been allowed on Good Friday here.
I think it was 2019 that it
Yeah,
came in. So we've had a few years. I think we only got one before shit hit the farm in 2020. So this is probably the first one post lockdown since we've had fans back at games and a Good Friday we can go for a few points.
yeah.
But
Well, that's
listen, we'll just book it. It was one day of the year. We're going mad because we couldn't have points on one day of the year. Like,
yeah.
what's that say about us as a country?
Well, it's gonna be nice now for a League of Ireland game. You can have a few points beforehand on Good Friday. I'm
That's
expecting
it.
attendances to be
Settle
up,
the nerves.
or would they be?
Yeah, attendances are hugely up this season. I suppose just looking at a Pat's point of view, the last full season we would have had with fans would have been 2019. That was my first year working with the club. Our average crowd would have been kind of 15, 16, 1700 in that sort of period or that sort of range. And we would have, like the max crowd we would have got is probably about 3,000. And that's when you're playing Rovers or Bows. Dundalk at their height, they did bring big crowds. They're not travelling as well lately, it seems. But yeah, it would be 3,500 would have been the max then. This season, we started off with Sligo the first home game of the season. We had 4,000 at that. Then there was nearly 5,000 here for Pats Rovers a week later. We played UCD on a Monday night and we had 2,500 in Richmond, which is just for a Monday night game
Mm,
in general, that's a really good crowd. But I remember going down to Richmond when we played UCD and there'd be seven or 800 on a Friday night.
yeah.
So I think that shows in particular the shift in support in the league for the league from just the general public. Um, it's probably been like a perfect melting pot of different things happening at once.
Yeah.
That's kind of helped that I think. Um, but yeah, no, crowds are up across the league, and season ticket sales are up hugely across the league. Like we've doubled our season ticket sales on our record this year. Like we the max we've ever had in the past was about 620, 630, and we had nearly 1,100 this year. So
Huge.
just those numbers alone are absolutely massive. Like,
So this melting
um,
pot, like we're talking COVID, obviously, not being able to go outside, not being able to go to
yeah,
games. You have the European Super League debacle,
yeah,
which I think turned a
definitely.
lot of people off, and also maybe Stephen Kenny's kind of feel good factor around the Irish national team filtering down into the League of Ireland.
Yeah, definitely. I think those three are all big uh, pieces of the pie. I think other things are the work that's been done with the academy structures in Ireland. So previously, the schoolboy clubs would have been considered the elite clubs, or the clubs that are producing the best and have the best players that would generally be being sold to England. So like Robbie Keane went through the Crumlin Academy, and then he was sold off
Yeah.
to England as a teenager, and it would have been very similar with, I suppose, the likes of Damien Duff. Like he would, was he Stella Marias? I think I'm not entirely sure, but
You
he
got
would have
Robbie
played for
Brady,
the,
Jeff Hendrick, list goes
yeah,
on.
like all these lads that are playing at St. Kevin's and stuff like that. Whereas it shifted about 5 6 years ago when they first introduced the National Under-19s League of Ireland, and then after that a 17s, a 15s, a 13s, which later turned to 14s. But that structure is in place now, and like I think Pats are a great example of how we've taken advantage of that. We're in the cup final last year with Dar Burns, who started and played a pivotal role in terms of winning the cup. Was brilliant in every game last season in general, but particularly good in the semi final where he scored a great goal against Dundalk and Richmond. James Mbankwa, who was 2 years younger, I think, than Dar Burns, he's actually gone to Udinese in the summer. He's come into the first team last year at 16 and has been an absolute colossal. He turned 17 there recently enough, and he's in our first team this season, and he's been brilliant again. So there's all these lads. Adam Murphy he's a bit of an unfortunate story there. He did his hamstring 20 minutes into his league debut last Friday on his 17th birthday.
Oh God.
He is going to be an absolute superstar. He needs to obviously he's going to see a specialist over his hamstring. It's 80% tear or something like that. It's a really bad injury. But there's these lads that are coming through now, and traditionally at 15, 16, they've already signed contract with United or Liverpool or Leicester or Leeds or some sort of English club or up in Scotland or somewhere like that, and they're gone. The benefit for these young lads is they get to stay here, they get to stay with their families, firstly, which is a huge thing. You're not being plucked out of your family home and thrown into a house with a load of young lads. That might seem like it's a great thing to do, or might be very appealing. And obviously, these lads want to go on to be professional footballers, so they're going to do the things you have to do to be a professional footballer. But they get to stay at home, they get to go through their education. Like James Mbankwa could have gone to Udinese in January, but he's staying in Ireland until the summer to do his leaving cert, and then he's moving to Italy. So there's a big shift in terms of players knowing that it's very hard to make it at the highest level, and that you need some sort of education to fall back on. But yeah, the academies have been brilliant in terms of bringing the league into the centre fold, I suppose, in Ireland.
Is that something that's been reflected throughout the league, like with every club? Is their academies doing well, or are Pats just doing exceptionally well?
I think if you were to probably look at if you were to look at minutes in terms of academy players that have come into the first team, and in terms of minutes, I'd say we're the top club by a considerable margin. But like Rovers have obviously had quite a lot. Like obviously Calvin Bazuna went to Man City at 16 after playing only a handful of games for Rovers, and look where he is at now, only a couple of years later. There's Kevin Zeppi, who's gone to Inter Milan, who's thought very highly of. He was Rovers as well. This guy that's gone to AC Milan from Cork City, Connor Heffernan, I think his name is.
Rob Heffernan's son.
Yeah, there you go. And there's another guy from Derry who's just signed for Liverpool. He's only 16. I don't think he's even made his Derry City debut yet. So you're seeing it throughout the league. Derry would be a really good club in terms of bringing players through. They've just traditionally always had that. Derry is a huge footballing city, and Derry City is so big there. Like there's obviously they support Liverpool and United and all that sort of stuff. Like anywhere else in the country, but like Derry City is a religion up there. Like that's obviously just such a tight knit community. But you are seeing it throughout the league where the academies are getting stronger. It obviously helps that they get the pick of the best bunch, where obviously the traditional schoolboy clubs before would have been able to do that because they had the links and they had the scouts coming to look at them. So it's unfortunate for them, but I think it's the best way forward for Irish football in terms of getting the best young players to be playing against the best young players every week. whereas like previously it had DDSL, which is obviously the top league, considered the top league in the country. But then there's probably players that are playing in Carlow or Cork or Kerry or Wexford who might not be able to travel up to Dublin to play in the best league or the best schoolboy league in the country. So you get to stay again. If you're from Cork, you can go and play for Cork. You play for Covet, you go play for Waterford, and then you play against the top young players, and that's just going to help with your development.
The future is definitely bright. It's looking good across the board. So you mentioned that that you worked for Pats. So what is your official job title with Pats?
So my job title was actually just changed there only recently enough. Yesterday I was actually 3 years with the club, so I've been there.
Oh wow! Congratulations,
good
happy anniversary!
Now. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So my new official title is Sales and Operations Manager.
Sales and Operations Manager.
It is a nice generic sort of title because it's my job is pretty broad. Like I would look after all the merchandise. I'd look after ticketing systems, kind of direct kind of fan interactions from the club, and then match day operations. There's lots of other kind of little things, but they'd be the main sort of duties that I'd be looking after Monday to Friday and weekends as well. Sometimes, but it's really enjoyable. Like I suppose it's someone asked me recently, it was like, "Oh, it must be great to work for Pats," and just kind of came to me, and I was like, "Well, it's what's really nice is to contribute to something that you care about and something that's bigger than you. Like you have to kind of sit back sometimes and look at it and be like, at the moment, and anyway, we've an average of 3,000 people, 3,500 people coming to watch us every week, and that's an outlet for these people. Like they're coming to get away from whatever's going on in their lives, or just have a night out, and their families come to the games, and there's kids that are obsessed. Like we had a summer Easter camp in Richmond Park this week, and the first team trained on Wednesday morning, so the kids were able to come and watch the training session. And then they got to meet all the players on the pitch then just after the training session. And like just players like Dara Burns and Chris Forrester just getting absolutely mobbed by 70 kids. Like just literally you're just seeing Dara Burns towering over. Like Dara Burns is only my height, but towering over and all these little kids, and they're all just obsessed about getting his autograph and saying hello to him. And like that's the sort of stuff I suppose we would have seen as looking at Premier League footballers when we were growing up. Yeah. Like if a group of kids would have seen Ronaldo walking down the street, or even, I don't know, Jermaine Genius, like someone who was probably considered an average Premier League player, but still an absolutely outstanding footballer, like they just get mobbed. So it's nice to see that happening for to players in the League of Ireland, and them getting recognised for their abilities, and the likes of Dara Burns and stuff like that. He'll probably go on and have a really good career and abroad, and I definitely see him playing for Ireland someday if he continues with his development.
Yeah, like I support Newcastle, and I've never seen Alan Shearer in person. I never even seen him play. But if I was from Inchicore, I'd see Chris Forrester, every Friday night or every second Friday, and I might even see him like during the week as well.
Yeah,
that would be that's amazing for the kids, And then they get that passion for Pats or Irish football at a very young age, and hopefully they turn into you when they're older and they're like going all the time, and they might even work for the club,
Yeah, well, I think something that I've looked at in my time at Pats is, and this is more of a broader league thing than maybe just encompassing St.Pats, but if you compare Dublin to like other European cities with like a similar population, like you look at Edinburgh would be a really good example, not too far away, very similarly culturally, and people are quite similar, and our habits would be quite similar in terms of what we do Monday to Friday, similar jobs and similar lifestyles just in general. But like you look at two huge clubs that they have in Edinburgh, Hibs and Hearts, they both have stadiums that are 20,000 capacity. They can play in Europe in their stadiums all the way through to whatever stage of competitions they get to. Usually not very far, but they have such big support for a population that I think is probably about 10 or 20,000 people smaller than Dublin. And then you look at the facilities that we have in the league, and Tallaght Stadium, by far the best League of Ireland ground. it's still not finished. I think it's been an ongoing process to be building that stadium for like 30 years. I
Yeah,
think they're adding the fourth side of it soon enough. But like that's their pinnacle. Like, and I think we can. The league will probably use that as the European stadium for the most part. I know Dundalk played and the Aviva and got very good crowds previously, and obviously Bowes used it last year during lockdowns and stuff like that. But the facilities are the big thing that are holding the league back in terms of making the crowds even bigger and better. And like it's obviously it's not a very easy thing to fix overnight. And it's good to see that a lot of clubs have kind of plans and things in place to hopefully improve facilities and redevelop and stuff like that. Obviously, the Daily Mount thing is ongoing for a while, and that was kind of put on ice because of COVID, but it looks like that'll be done in the next couple of years. We obviously have hopes to redevelop Richmond at some point in the future. Shells are looking at buying Talca Park off the City Council. I'm not sure how viable that is, but it's good to see them having the ambition of wanting to own their own ground and to
yeah,
hopefully redevelop it and stuff. Um, so yeah, like there is stuff in the works for a lot of League of Ireland clubs, but the facilities are our biggest obstacle at the moment. Um, like there's no reason why Rovers, Pats, Bows can't all have 10,000 going to games every week. Like,
yeah,
or population of the Greater Dublin area is 2 million people. I think in Richmond Park or Inchicourt's catchment area, I think there's over 800,000 people. Why can't we have 10,000 people going down to watch Pats on a Friday night? And out of 800,000, like football is the most participated sport in the country, and obviously the most popular sport in the world. Like you look at Dublin GAA, like they're getting 20, 30, 40, 50, 80,000, depending on obviously what stage of the season they're at. So there's no reason why we can't have that every week in the League of Ireland. But yeah, facilities are our biggest obstacle at the moment. So once we get that sorted, I think we'll see the league grow even to another level again. But there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done, and you see clubs like Bows, ourselves, and Rovers, and every club throughout the league really developing their fan base and just seeing more kids and young families going to games and stuff like that. It's great to see, but the facilities are where what the next step needs to be in terms of the evolution of the league.
It's a really good example with Edinburgh. Never really thought about it, just how big those two clubs are in Edinburgh. Huge, and the history they have, and comparing that to the teams in Dublin and the structure and facilities and all, it's crazy. You mentioned COVID. How did COVID affect your day-to-day running of the club, like your job?
Uh, Pretty much my job came to a standstill for like 2-3 months. Like my job was in the office, answering phone calls, answering emails, selling merchandise, selling tickets, organising games. So like essentially overnight in March 2020, all that sort of stuff went away and it just didn't exist anymore. And there was definitely a period where I felt I think this is all over. Like I think the league, I didn't think the league could survive because there was obviously, especially at the beginning, there was no, oh well, we're back in 2 weeks. That was the
Yeah,
initial thing, and we're like, oh, that's grand. I remember thinking at the time, this is gas, like getting 2 weeks off. And little did we know, like I don't think the ball was kicked again until the 31st of July. Um, so yeah, for me, like it died overnight. Like I didn't have anything to do for probably at least 2 months, and then slowly things start kind of coming back.
yeah,
Like even in terms of merchandise sales, like we couldn't get anything because there was no shipping in the world. There was no, like, you couldn't get containers in for gear, and you couldn't order stuff, and things weren't being produced. And if you were, it was crazy lead times, and it was crazy fees for things to be shipped. So like a lot of that died a death for a good while. And when I came back, I was the COVID officer for the club, and I ran the match days, and still do run the match day operations. That obviously we went from 100 and allowed to have
mm,
126 people in the ground, including your players. So the 22 players on the pitch and the three officials on the pitch, they all counted.
yeah,
So there's very few people you can have in the ground. So it was very hard to be turning people away and all that sort of stuff. But it just obviously at the time we had to do it. We had to keep the safest precautions going to keep games alive and to keep clubs alive. Because, as I said to you, there was definitely a point there where I felt, how long can clubs survive? Obviously, players are under contract, so players need to be paid, and obviously government stepped in and helped all businesses across the country just keep the day-to-day going. So yeah, there's just a madness. Like my job essentially just disappeared overnight, and obviously that's a weird thing to work your way through with such a strange time to be living in general.
Yeah, it was crazy for a while there. Still is. Was it frustrating having like the government say, 100 people and then 50 people and then 0 people and then 1,000 people? It changed, like it fluctuated so much, based obviously on hospitalizations, COVID cases, etc. How frustrating was that for you, or was it frustrating at all to have to deal with kind of relying on the government to know what the future was for Pats?
Yeah, I suppose it's at the beginning, I was just so grateful to be back, and I was just so happy that football was back and that we were going to be playing again. And I kind of tried to take the positives out of it at the time, and I was like, well, at least there was obviously the LOI TV. It might actually have had a different name at the beginning, but there was a streaming service in place so that fans could watch the games, where something like that would never exist before.
Yeah.
Like, if you wanted to watch a League of Ireland game, you go to the ground and you pay your 15 quid in, and that's how you watch a League of Ireland game. It was never, you obviously get the odd game on RTE, and then St.Pats obviously did a lot back in the past when they existed and stuff like that. But if you wanted to watch League of Ireland, it was going to it. So it was great to obviously know that fans could watch from home and support. And I suppose social media was a good thing, where you could see people like obviously posting pictures of watching them with their friends and family and stuff from home, and that was great. But it was definitely it was difficult, because there were still fans turning up the gates and asking to come in, and you could see the emotion on their face that they've been locked at home for the last 2, 3, 4 months, like you have, and everything in your head is just like, I'm looking at an empty ground here and I can't let this person in. It's obviously difficult to process, because we have ground that holds 5,000 people, but you can only have 125 or 128 or whatever it was. So stuff like that was very difficult, and I think it stopped after a couple of games, because I think people realised that you are putting staff that were working the games and operating the games in a kind of an unfair position. And I suppose gradually we didn't have fans back until May 2021. So there was nearly a year there where we were playing football and there was no fans in stadiums. So I think everyone watched football during lockdowns on Sky Sports or on BT or whatever. And it was just different, like, to be watching a game of football and the stands were empty. It just seemed so strange.
It was a different sport.
It was a different sport for a while, and I think there was a lot of talk around for a period that it suited some players and it didn't suit other players. And funnily enough, I think Chris Forrester really benefited, and I think he's talked about that really benefited him, just for where he was in his life and to be able to go and express himself on a Friday night, and not have hundreds of eyes or thousands of eyes there watching him. So I think I think how the level he's got back to now and the level he's probably exceeded in the past where he is currently, I think that's down to having that time of being able to work on his game without probably that little bit more pressure on him.
Yeah.
But the first game back with fans was just amazing. Like, it was just great to be able to like welcome people back in. And I had to go through like a proper check-in process where we would have obviously done temperatures, and fans would have had to do a COVID assessment survey ahead of time to obviously confirm that they weren't suffering from symptoms and they weren't a close contact and kind of all that sort of stuff. So yeah, they rode to the ground, you did your temperature, you checked them in, everyone had a designated seat or standing spot, so there was like a little sticker on the ground or on their chair. They had to stay in those seats for obviously contact tracing purposes and for social distancing purposes. So it was a lot of work in terms of like organising all that, but it was so worth it just to bring people back. And as I said, it did gradually kind of increase then. And at no point it drew back. It was a gradual kind of jump I think we went from 200 to 500 to 700 to 1,000 to 50% capacity, and then 100%. I think that I think it changed pretty much every month. Like it did increase every month as obviously we were going through the summer, so cases were a little bit lower, and people were generally being able to spend a lot more time outside than they had at the start of COVID, with just weather and stuff like that. So um, yeah, just having people back, and I think in a funny way, there was obviously a big demand for tickets because more than 500 people would want to go to a game.
Yeah.
So I think in a way, going into this season, that kind of went into people's mind. Well, oh geez, what happens if there's a restriction again? It was like, I
Mm.
better buy a season ticket, or I better buy my tickets in advance, and I think that's changed people's mindsets, especially at Pats. I'd say it's probably similar to other clubs in terms of people buying in advance, and there's definitely at Pats we've definitely seen a shift in where in 2019 80% of our ticket sales were in person, where it's totally shifted the other way now, where 80% of our ticket
Yeah.
sales are online and it's in advance, and people are making arrangements ahead of time rather than just rocking up to the ground, paying your cash in and going in. Um, it's obviously beneficial for the club because we have access to the funds straight away, and it goes into the kitty to help pay wages and bills and all that sort of stuff. So it's um, there's a lot of positives I think I can take out of COVID that have benefited the league and benefited my job and made things easier and stuff like that. So it's obviously you'd never wish it to go through it again, but that there is positives that you take out of it for sure.
During that time, I'm curious, how did your support as a fan change? Like, so before you were employed by the club and before you got so close where it was just you were one of the only people in the stadium, if you seen Chris Forrester, you might have been like, oh my God, Chris Forrester. But then during that time, you're like, all right, Chris, you know, I'm assuming you developed like really close relationships with these people who you would have just supported beforehand.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely still get that feeling. Like I suppose it's probably more so with like Chris Forrester in
Yeah.
Birmingham, people who have been at the club for a very long time. Like I definitely, because I know them, and like we talk every week, um, whether it be in passing or for a few minutes, or if they're in the office doing something. So I still get that kind of feeling where I'm like, oh, geez, I talked to Chris Forrester, and I'm like, I know him, like he asked me how I am and asked me
Yeah.
how my day was and stuff like that. So that's definitely strange, and um, I think one thing obviously in the league there's usually a big turnover of players, and when I first kind of came in, I came in probably 2 months into a season, so I didn't really have that relationship with like the squad and stuff like that. And then there would have been a big kind of turnover through COVID and stuff like that, and I would have met players kind of the days they signed. So I definitely feel now like I'd know most players would know me by name, and they know what I do and know what I'm about and stuff like that. So it's I think that helps a lot in terms of your day to day job and getting people to do things, and just the I hate using this word because it's just a made up word, but like the synergy of the club, like everyone knows everyone now.
Yeah.
And obviously with games behind closed doors, I was checking everyone that went into the ground. Had to be checked in by me because I was the COVID officer to make sure that their temperature wasn't too high and that they had filled out their COVID assessment form and stuff like that. So you grow quite close, I guess. Um, so yeah, like that stuff is great, and there's definitely times at the beginning where I kind of just had to sit back and just be like, Jesus, I'm in a very privileged position here.
Mm.
Like there's hundreds and thousands of people that would like to come in and watch Pats play, and I'm one of the probably, I suppose, die-hard fans are probably one of the very small few that are here. There's obviously other people that work for the club who are big supporters and stuff like that, and that's generally been how people have been hired over the last few years. But like I was one of the very, very few people that were like actual Pats fans that got to go to games, and was obviously there in a working capacity, not there to just watch a game of football, but got the benefit of watching the games as well.
Yeah. So being there and working for the club hasn't affected your diehard support of the club and the team.
Um, I think it's different, I
Yeah.
guess. Um, like I definitely would have considered myself a diehard, and I go home and away every week. for the most part. But I guess you're living in it every day, and like you're waking up and you're putting on a Pat's hoodie to go into the office or whatever, and you're cycling to work, and people in Inchicore are walking down or waving to you, and they know who you are, and like you feel encompassed into the club, and you obviously do feel a big part of it. But I suppose your mindset shifts from just wanting to win a football match. Like I don't think about the football anymore until it's happening, where fans are probably just thinking about the football all the time.
Yeah.
Where like now I'm like, oh Jesus, are the Portaloos going to be here on time? Do I have enough jerseys hanging up in the merchandise store? Did I print enough tickets? Are all my cash floats ready? Like my head is just such in a spin, especially on match days. Like there's just so much going on, and it's like just like spinning plates. So it until I hear the whistle, essentially the football doesn't exist for me yet.
Yeah.
So that's probably the thing that's changed. You're just so concerned with, like a big thing for me is like I obviously want the match day experience for everyone coming to the game to be the best it possibly can, because I want them to come back next week.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether we win 5-0 or we lose 1-0 or we draw with the worst team in the league, regardless of the result, I want people to come back to Richmond Park the next week and to be proud to be coming back and be proud to have this as their team. I think obviously results will always be the biggest factor in terms of crowds coming back, but there's so many other little things that you can fill in that will just make it a more pleasant experience for people, and just I suppose convert them into diehards. That's what you want. Like we have so many teenagers, kids, and young families, as I said previously, coming to games now, and you want them to come back regardless of what's going on in the pitch. So that's the biggest thing. As you said, you're a Newcastle fan. You've gone through the thick of it. You've seen them going very close to win the Premier League in the 90s, and then being challenging for top four and playing in Champions League and stuff like that. But I suppose the last 15 years for a Newcastle fan hasn't been too good with the ownership and going up and down leagues and stuff like that. But you've stuck it through them thick and thin, and we want people like that. We want people that want to be about what we're about, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm sure time will tell, but if you keep up the work that you're doing and all the good work that the club is doing in the area as well, I'm sure we'll see positives from it. So the last question for you: are you from Inchicore area originally?
So I would have grown up in Drimna. I would have been born into a Drimna family, Galtymore Road. So my granddad would have been kind of going to games on and off since the 70s or so.
Right.
So that would have been my big kind of push into the League of Ireland. Would have been my grandfather. So yeah, literally, it's my office is a 5-minute walk from my grandmother's house and my grandparents' house in Drimna. So we grew up very close to it, and yeah, been going down since I was about 10 years old.
So what does Pats and the club mean to yourself or to your family or people from Inchicore or Drimna from the area? How would you describe it?
I think Pats has always kind of been a bit of a parish club, whereas I suppose, and it's the fan base is definitely expanded, but traditionally, like Pats fans are coming from Inchicore, Ballyfermot, Drimna, Walkinstown, Crumlin, and then you're kind of bordering over into where a lot of Rovers fans stuff come from. So like it is traditionally a very tight knit kind of fan base, and then generally kind of everyone knows everyone, and they're from certain areas. Pats have always been kind of a community club, and as I probably used there the term a parish club, where you probably use that to describe like GAA clubs and stuff like that, or just rural clubs, where the reach of the Bows fans probably has always been quite far, and similar to Shamrock Rovers. Yeah. They've obviously played in lots of different kind of parts of Dublin over the last 30 years especially. But I think it's just me growing up, I would have known most people going to games, and you'd say hello to them, or you'd nod to them, or you'd be jumping up and down celebrating with them when we score a goal or whatever. So I suppose it's just that tight-knit community of people that are coming to support the team that has traditionally always kind of worked hard, and we're generally we in fairness, that we have probably one of the most successful clubs in the league over the last 30 years or so. But we're usually quite a hard working team, and that's kind of, I suppose, reflects onto the fan base. A lot of work and hard work and working class people from Inchicore, Ballyferma, Trimna, all those sort of areas. So I think the team has generally reflected the support, and the last couple of years when they're about Donald, you definitely seeing that, and then the work rate has still continued under Tim Clancy this season. So I think those sort of things have been instilled into the fan base and into the team.
Brilliant. Well, Karl, I wish you the best. Good luck today at the match.
Thank you.
And good luck with the rest of the season.
Cheers, bud. Appreciate that. Thanks for having me on.
Talk to you later.
See you later.